Welcome, delicious friend. They say that fallen London is a city of 1,000 stories, and they'd be right. And I'm here to share those stories with you. So sit back, pour yourself a glass of Broken Giant 1844, and enjoy. Ah, my friend, it is good to see you. I do apologise for the mess. I have only just returned from Mutton Island, you see. I was there to enjoy the fruits of the Z Festival as I do most years. It was a rather interesting gathering this year. I spoke with the mayor, earned myself a rather pretty knife to go with my collection, and took in a spot of fishing. It was rather relaxing, all told, and now we find each other once again in relatively decent health. Ah, you've come such a long way, delicious friend, since we first met. I'd like to think that I have changed too, for the better, I hope, in our time as associates. But before I wax poetic and spend all day with a gleam in my eye, I feel it best we begin today's discussion in earnest. Today, my friend, I wish to talk to you of another peculiarity of Neathly life. Our nearly deceased brothers and sisters, the Tomb-Colonists, for I find them fascinating and rather tragic all at once. Seeing as death is usually a temporary inconvenience at best down here, it is not all that surprising that people like the Tomb-Colonists would exist, especially in a society as obsessed with public decency as our fair city is. To have severely wounded people walking around so openly with festering flesh and limbs falling off would cause quite the uproar, hence the bandages or the mostly voluntary exile in the colonies themselves. Most of the city seems rather content to forget that the tomb colonies exist, but they are important to understanding the world down here, and their stories are just as interesting and just as important as those of the other groups in our fair city. I should also note, for your health if nothing else, that the tomb colonists have very little to do in their colonies save for dueling one another, and seeing as no one can easily die down here, it follows that the tomb colonists are some of the most dangerous people in the Neath. This is especially true as they have little left to fear, they generally feel little to no pain, and have years of experience to back up their combat prowess. I would consider dueling a master of the tomb colonies to be one of the more terrifying prospects one could come to face with down here. The tomb colonies themselves lie mostly to the north of London, where the waters are cold, dust dances on the winds, and it could even be said that the very air takes on a sepia tone. These vast enclaves of the nearly dead are usually closed to the living, and as such the tomb colony that most are at least familiar with is Vanderbilt, a dreary, depressing place, and yet compared to the other colonies it is positively warm in its attitude toward the living. If you are at all inclined to a career at Z, the run north to Vanderbilt is a relatively safe trek, and it can be a rather nice little earner, so long as you don't mind transporting new tomb colonists to their homes, that is. Vanderbilt is also home to several locations and individuals important to the tomb colonies as a whole. It is home to the first curator. I wouldn't exactly call them a leader as such. They are, however, responsible for the preservation of the colonies in general. The curator is ancient, as old as the Third City. It is said that even their time is coming to an end, that they are beginning to wither away, and that they have one last request for Z-captains at Vanderbilt. Another location of interest within Vanderbilt itself would be the Vengeance of Jonah, a restaurant the finest in the tomb colonies, which I realise doesn't sound like much, but the Vengeance is considered an excellent eatery even by London standards, an assessment I readily agree with. Its head chef, a bandaged poissonnier, is also a rather interesting fellow. His talent as a chef is undeniable, although his kitchen is said to look more like the laboratory of a deranged wizard scientist than any kitchen I have ever seen. The poissonnier has been known to travel with Z-captains. For a time he was aboard my vessel. I learned much of him during our time together, enough to consider him a friend, and as such I won't relay to you his entire history, but I would say that he fits with the common conception of the colonies being home to those forgotten or exiled, even if in his case said exile was voluntary. For those tomb-colonists reaching the end of their time in this life, who find themselves too decrepit to duel to the death, or die at the hand of some beast or another, there are few options that remain. One that every tomb-colonist knows is to check into the Grand Sanatorium, where they may wither away to dust in peace. It is said by some that this is more dignified than the alternative, namely being eaten by the frost moths. There is some debate over this, but I can safely say that, as a person who suffers from rather crippling motophobia, the idea of peacefully withering to dust sounds like heaven compared to being devoured by those winged monstrosities. Oh, come now, everyone is afraid of something, delicious friend. Some are scared of drowning, others of devils or of the dark, which I imagine would be exceptionally crippling down here. My weakness happens to be moths. Now, may we move on? Good. Venderbite isn't the only tomb colony, of course, but it is the only one most non-tomb colonists end up visiting. The others are either simply strange and alien, like Tana-Chuk with its odd way of dividing up the day and the near-religious reverence this system of time is given there, or they are simply enclaves of the nearly dead wishing to be left alone. However, whilst Tana-Chuk may be strange and the other colonies depressing, they are only as dangerous as most places in the Neath, perhaps a little more so. The other tomb colony of note, Xibalba, is something far more horrifying. Named for the Mayan underworld, its name translates roughly to the place of fear. It has earned this title. Ruled by the god-eaters of the Third City, very few mortals who ever stray there return. The names of these god-eaters seem innocuous: Cat, Redbird, and the Serpent, but that changes nothing about the danger they pose. They were priest-kings before the Bazaar took their city, delighting in human sacrifice, but their price was different to that of the cities that came before or since. I won't divulge the details of their deal, nay, I can't. There are only a few things I promise never to speak of, and the finer details of the deal for the Third City are some of those that I simply cannot divulge. Please understand, my friend, I only avoid these details to protect you. I have seen this knowledge drive people to rather destructive behaviour. Come, let us discuss more friendly topics before this meeting of ours ends on a note most sour. Of the tomb colonists within the city, the two I would recommend at least acquainting yourself with would be the Mercies, a pair of sisters, Grace and Lettice. They are wild daredevils and certainly exhilarating to be around, though there is risk to one's health in doing so. Lettice is said to have many a suitor within the city, whilst Grace has many an up-and-coming duelist seeking her patronage and sponsorship. Another tomb colonist of note is the once-dashing smuggler, whose story we have discussed when talking of the Khanate. Some say Fiduci is a prince of the tomb colonies, but this, like everything about our previous mayor, is only a glimpse of the truth. Finally, there is also the matter of my own time within the tomb colonies. In my time down here, I have caused quite a number of scandals, and as such have spent plenty of time waiting for said scandals to die down in the colonies, writing letters back home and enjoying the company of the locals. I was once in the running to be Imperial Artist in Residence, you know. Yes, and as part of that, I had to get myself exiled to create the right amount of disgrace to stoke the fires of rumour and gossip so popular in the circles of society and aristocracy. We still have a lot to blame Lord Byron for, it seems. How was I exiled? Oh, my friend, I wish I could regale you with all the sordid details, but I must retain some decency if I wish to save what little reputation I have left. All I shall say is that it involved myself, a rather lovely woman with a barbed wit, and an exceptionally handsome gentleman, some would say an acclaimed beauty. It also involved Her Enduring Majesty's throne being used in such a way that thrones aren't intended for. Ah, that was a night certainly worth the exile. Forgive me for getting caught up in my memories, delicious friend. I realise it somewhat derailed our conversation on the tomb colonies and the colonists. I do hope you can excuse me my little indulgences in the past. I so rarely get to enjoy the pleasures of the city anymore. Perhaps in that way I am similar to the tomb colonists. I wonder if the fate of everyone down here is to end up like them, bandaged and duelling, or withering patiently for the end. Perhaps destiny has other plans for you and I. The future is unwritten, after all.